Morning. We're going to be in the most difficult book of the Bible to find, the book of Genesis. So we're going to start off. We're going to kind of do a very brief review, kind of introduce what we're going to do, and kind of get into chapter 4 and 5. Everybody get an outline that wants one, or notes, set of notes that wants one? Okay. Anybody need one? Okay. Good. All right, so let's go ahead and open up to Genesis 3. And we'll pray and get started this morning. Father, thank you for your goodness to us. Lord, I pray that you would help us as we study your word to learn these such vital truths. Really, all of your word is important to us. And Father, I pray that you'd help us to take this with seriousness, help us to be open to the truth. And Lord, I pray that you would give us wisdom and discernment, help us to focus, help us to be attentive. And Lord, I pray that you'd just help us be better and effectual students of your word. In Jesus' name, amen. So, last week, not last week, 3 weeks ago, wow, it's been a little while. So 3 weeks ago, we were in Genesis chapter 3 and looking in particular at the fall. And so prior to the fall, we noted that man was under a particular covenant and under a particular dispensation. And so the covenant is often referred to as the Edenic covenant, and then man was under the dispensation of innocence. So when God made man, he made him perfect and upright in a happy state, as the different confessions would say. He was created in God's image. He was created in righteousness and true holiness, and man fell from that state. The covenant was that man was to fill the earth, have babies, keep the garden, to rule over the earth in God's place, being there in the image of God, and to have dominion over the earth, and was given one command. You know, we look at the Bible and we see all the commands that we have. You know, in the Old Testament there's 613. In the New Testament there's over 2,000. And we have a hard time keeping those. Man had one. Don't eat one particular piece of fruit. Which, for me, that's not hard. That's not hard at all. It's like, don't eat a piece of fruit. Well, I won't eat any fruit then. That's fine. And what did man do? He had access to every other fruit and vegetable there was. He said, you know what? I'm going to do that one thing. Don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And that's exactly what man did. And because of the fall, now sin has come into the world, death has come into the world, man was separated from God. And what was supposed to happen when Adam ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? He was supposed to die. God said, the day you eat, you will die. Now, is that what happened? No, that's not what happened. Why didn't that happen? Because of God's mercy. Instead, something else died in Adam's place. Probably a lamb. I just think that that's fitting. But an animal of some kind was killed, at least one, maybe more, in order to provide coats of skins for Adam and Eve to cover their shame and their nakedness. Now, so physical death did not take place right away. Although the process did begin, because now what's going to happen? Adam and Eve is going to be kicked out of the garden. They're not going to have access to the tree of life. So now they are going to die, and so their body now is going to begin to decay. Entropy is setting in. You know, our cells break down. You know, the ladies told me the other day, Pastor, thank you for reminding us that all this dust is mostly skin particles that are falling off. Well, what's an even greater thought than that is the fact that you are born dying. Your cells are dying, and they have to keep reproducing. And at a certain point in life, you begin to lose the battle. And it begins to show on your body, and you begin to feel the fact that, I'm losing this battle, and my body's not fixing itself like it used to. Why is that? Well, all that started back in the Garden of Eden, and the process is faster now than it was back then. Because, as we're going to see today, you get into Genesis chapter 5, and people are living almost 1,000 years. Well, now, people are, the life of man, Psalm says, is 70, and if by chance it's 80 or 80 years, so 70 to 80 years on average lifespan of a person, Sometimes there's less, sometimes there's more. All that began then. But another death took place. That was spiritual death, and that's where man was separated from God. Because now, instead of enjoying the fellowship of God and looking forward to God coming into the garden to walk with Adam and Eve, now when God comes in, they hide from him when they hear him walking through the garden and hear the trees rustling or whatever. They're hiding from him because of their shame. Their eyes are open and they know that they are sinful and wicked, and God is infinitely holy, and that's frightening. But then another death was potential, and that's eternal death. Hell was not made for man. Hell was made for Satan and his angels, who had already fallen by this time. But now there was a possibility that man could go there. Because the moment Adam fell, he became a child of the devil. All of his descendants would be children of the devil. But God, in his grace and mercy, provided a sacrifice. He made propitiation for his sin. The innocent died for the guilty. There was a blood sacrifice made. And so from the moment of the fall, now God establishes another covenant with humanity and places man under another dispensation or stewardship or a test. And that's where we're at here in our notes. Notice here in this first line, the second covenant is called the Adamic covenant. And kind of the terms of this covenant are listed there in the last portion of Genesis chapter 3. And we looked at most of that last time. But this covenant conditions life after the fall. It puts conditions on life after the fall. And the conditions remain in place until the kingdom. So the effects of the fall are going to remain on earth until Jesus Christ comes back a second time. Romans 8:21, Romans chapter 8 makes it abundantly clear that the creature, the creation, was subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who has subjected the same in hope. So God placed, even though it was man that sinned, God placed all of creation under a curse, under vanity. We see trees that rot. You drive down the highways and you see all these trees in the woods falling over. They died. They're rotting. You see the earthquakes. Hear the earthquakes, volcanoes going off. You go down places around the mountains and stuff like that, and you see the stress in the rocks and everything like that that's going on. This creation is suffering. You see the... I used to enjoy watching Wild Kingdom back when Discovery Channel actually had science and animals and stuff like that on it. Before it was all just a bunch of home renovation shows and all this stupid stuff. And I used to think it was the coolest thing to watch the lions and the leopards hunt the zebras and watch the wildebeest get too close to the river and crocodiles and alligators jump out and grab them by the head. And that's pretty cool to watch that stuff, I think. But all that's a part of the curse. All that suffering that exists in the world is part of the curse. And it's because God has the expectation that Jesus Christ is going to come back and release all of creation from the curse. And so the conditions that now exist as a result of the fall are going to continue until Jesus comes back. And so what are the elements here of this covenant? Well, the serpent is cursed. So now, what we see today as snakes without legs, at one point they had some sort of legs or arms. The evolutionary people will tell us, well, snakes evolved from a four-legged creature. Well, that doesn't seem like an evolution. That seems like a de-evolution, right? A devolution. Losing things is not necessarily an improvement, right? But they'll say, well, see, there's hips on the snake and stuff like that. And there's I was thinking about this morning, that's possible. It could be that God left a remnant within them to say, look, at one point, snakes did have legs. That's very possible. Because here in Genesis, part of the curse was what? Taking those legs away, and now they're going to crawl on their belly all the days of their life. And so the serpent becomes a warning in nature of the effects of sin. You know, I don't know too many people that like snakes. Most people that I know that like snakes are deranged. And they've got something, that they've got mental and emotional issues. They got daddy issues or something. And anybody here like snakes? Nobody's going to admit it now. See? Proving my point. Oh, boy. But a serpent in the Scripture becomes an embodiment of sin. It becomes a picture throughout the Scripture of sin. And we see this very clearly because you remember in Numbers, when the children of Israel are out there complaining in the wilderness, and God sends fiery serpents into the camp and begin to bite the people start dying. And what does God say? Moses, make a pole. On the top of that pole, put a bronze serpent. And that's exactly what he does. And whosoever looks will live. They'll be healed. Well, Jesus in John chapter 3 says, the same way that Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so the Son of Man must be lifted up. So Jesus was going to be put on a cross. And that was the fulfillment of what that serpent on the pole was. Well, what was happening on the cross? It wasn't just that Jesus was dying. 2 Corinthians 5:21, he became sin for us who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God. Why does God use the imagery of the serpent and then compares Jesus to that serpent? Because Jesus on the cross became sin in our place. It was the picture. The Redeemer is promised, Genesis 3:15. I'll put enmity between thee and the woman, between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. So there's going to be a war going on between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. The woman's state is changed in 3 areas. So instead of having one child at a time, there's going to be the potential to have multiple children at the same time. She's going to have pain not only in the birthing process, but also in motherhood. And she's going to be subject to the headship of man. Now, this is going to become important in just a moment because once we get in chapter 4, we're going to see that Eve is going to have twin sons. The first 2 sons are going to be twin sons. Then there's burdensome labor. Work is not a part of the curse. The toil and sorrow and burden of work is part of the curse. Work was something that should have been enjoyable. Now, sometimes it is enjoyable. Sometimes you get a job that you like, and you never work a day in your life. But for most of us, that's probably not so much the case. You go out and you work, and you get done. It's like, man, I wish I didn't have to do this, but you got to do this. There's going to be sorrow in life. There's going to be physical death. And really, this curse is for man's sake. In fact, God says, when you go out, you're going to have to work so hard, you're not even going to eat apart from the sweat of your brow. Why? Man has to be kept out of trouble. His nature has changed from that of righteousness and true holiness to now he has a nature of sin. And sin is something that his flesh craves and desires. And the only thing to kind of really curb that desire is to exhaust him, keep him worn out. It's like you do with kids, right? Go outside and run, carry stuff. Here's some bricks, carry them across the yard. Okay, now pick them up and carry them back over there. Because it's like, I want you tired so you stay out of my hair. And so now with this covenant comes another responsibility, a stewardship, which brings us to the dispensation of conscience. So now that man has sinned, the first promise of redemption comes, and the first parents are to be expelled from the garden. So they go out. Now, as a result of the tree of knowledge of good and eating the tree of knowledge of good and evil, man now has experiential knowledge of good and evil. Initially, it was supposed to be theoretical. See, like, doing heroin. I know that doing heroin is an evil thing. But I don't know that experientially. I know that theoretically. I've not had anybody that I know close to me that has been involved with that. I have not done it myself. So I don't know from experience, but I know it's evil because of the effects that I know it has on other people and what it can do to a person. And that's the way it was supposed to be with Adam and Eve when it came to evil. They could easily know experientially all that is good because they're walking with God in the cool of the day. They could know theoretically what is evil because Satan and the angels had fallen and they're running around. They could see God's judgment and curse on them because eventually a point would come where God would cast Satan. Had man not fallen, God would cast Satan and his angels into the lake of fire, which was prepared for them. And so Adam would know theoretically, by seeing that, all that's evil. We're not going to do that. But now he has chosen to violate God's word, and God's command. And now experientially, he knows good and evil. And so now, the responsibility that he has is that he must now do all that he knows to be good, abstain from everything that he knows to be evil, and he can now only approach God by way of a blood sacrifice. So this is the dispensation that he has. And man's failure, just as with every dispensation, man fails. Dispensation of innocence ended with the failure of Adam in eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The dispensation of conscience is going to end in failure because man is supposed to do everything that he knows to be good, abstain from all that he knows to be evil. And notice over in chapter 6. This is what chapter 6 is about. Once we get over to chapter 6, looking forward to covering this passage. Chapter 6, verse 1, it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God took the daughters of men, that they were saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Now watch this. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Now watch down to verse number 5. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So at this point, is man doing what he knows to be good and abstaining from what he knows to be evil? No, he's flip-flopped that, doing the exact opposite. And this is exactly why God judges the earth. We'll give a little tidbit. The sons of God, daughters of men is not about angels and people. God does not send a flood to wipe out some mixed race, some mixed breed, hybrid breed of angels and people. The reason God floods the earth, and he has not done it since then, is because there was a particular test for man at this point. Do all the good, abstain from all the evil, otherwise I'm going to wipe you out. And that's exactly what God does, because man failed. And we notice that afterwards, if you go to chapter 8, that particular responsibility, that test, I guess I should say, that test ends. Chapter 8, after the flood, Noah's getting off the ark, and drop down to verse number 21. Lord smelled the sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake, for the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I again smite any more everything that liveth as I have done. So now, God says, I'm not going to do that again. With water, anyway. Because we know the day is coming when he's going to do it with fire. He's going to baptize this earth in fire. But the test of moral responsibility ended, but man continues in a state of moral responsibility as further revelation is added through successive ages. So every person has a moral responsibility. Everybody has a knowledge of right and wrong. And that is added to. When a person, as you go through, there's more information given with Noah. There's more information given with when you get to Abraham. there's more information given when you get to Moses. When you get to Christ, there's more information. Everybody in the world is responsible for that information that is given as God gives it. Just like today. Do people without Jesus Christ go to hell today? Absolutely. Why? It's because the gospel has been made available to them, and they choose to reject it and not walk in the light of their conscience and seek after God. And so people are still held responsible. Now let's notice here. Let's go to the end of Genesis chapter 3 and get into the main lesson and see how this works out. Genesis 3, verse 22. And the Lord God said, Behold, the man is become as one of us to know good and evil. And now lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. So apparently there's one entrance, one gate to the Garden of Eden. And it was on the east side. And there was a trail that went in and out, some road of some kind. Now, Wayne and I had talked about this on a number of occasions. And this just blows my mind. You have to understand, when they go out of the Garden of Eden, they're going out, and there's not a whole lot of people for the first while. Or at least, at this point, there's Adam and Eve, and then even over the 2,000 years, I don't think we're looking at a population necessarily as big as what we have now, but everybody had access to get to the garden. They couldn't go into the garden, but they knew where the garden was. I mean, this is a big place. This place, it's the entirety of the Middle East, the garden is. Everybody knows about it, and everybody that could come by, and notice it says cherubim, or cherubims, it's plural, there's at least more than one, so there's at least two, probably more, many more than that. And there's these creatures there holding flaming swords. And it says they turned every which way. They did, or what does it say exactly? Flaming sword was turned every way. Now, what exactly that means, I'm not 100% sure. I kind of look at it as being similar to a lightsaber. When it says turned every way, it means that it didn't have necessarily two blades where it only cut in one direction. It cut every direction. And so, here's these creatures, and people could come by this thing all the time and see these creatures there. And yet, they continue to rebel against God. That just shows you the depth of the depravity within man. That man is totally corrupt apart from God's grace. Why anybody would think I can be good enough and earn my salvation is beyond me. Because if you could, then you'd have it by now. But they are so corrupt that even knowing man was kicked out of this paradise, and now there's no way for us to get into it because of man's sin, they still continue to go as they were. Now, when we get in chapter 4 and 5 here, there's a division of the human race. So the beginning of chapter 4, it's supposed to say, that marks is not supposed to be there. It's beginning of chapter 4 begins the time when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. So Genesis chapter 6, when it says when men began to multiply, that timestamp there is referring back to what's taking place in chapter 4 and chapter 5, as men are multiplying. So, in this chapter and following, we see that the human race is divided into two types of people. There's the children of God and the children of Satan, two seeds. This is exactly what Genesis 3:15 prophesied, that there is going to be two lines. There's going to be the seed of Satan. There's going to be the seed of the woman. Now, in one way, the seed of the woman would be all of creation, all of humanity, because Eve is the mother of all living. But as we go through Genesis, that line is going to be narrowed down. It's going to be narrowed down to Seth here in chapter 5. It's going to be narrowed down to Noah. Then it's going to be narrowed down to Shem. Then it's going to be narrowed down to Abraham. and then to Jacob, Isaac and Jacob, and so forth as you go down. So now notice, so the curse of the fall is perpetuated to all succeeding generations. Romans 5:12. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned. The moment Adam sinned, Adam acting as our representative head of the human race, because he was the first man, his transgression became our transgression, because we're united to Adam. We were all in Adam. The Bible says, in Adam all die. He's our representative. And so just like, remember with Achan in Joshua chapter 7, Achan steals the wedge of gold, the silver, and the Babylonian garment. And so, who's punished for that? Is it just Achan that receives the punishment? No, his entire family. Why? Because he's the representative of his household. And so, this is exactly the way it is with the human race. Man became sinful. As a result of the first man's sin, all subsequent generations are born in sin, separated from God. Ephesians 2:1 says, we're dead in trespass and sins, and therefore we must have blood shed to make reconciliation for sin. So this is exactly what we're going to see now as we move into chapter 4. So now let's look here. Chapter 4, verse 1. Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. Now this is more of an exclamation than just a mere statement. She's excited. Because she was told just prior to this that her seed is going to crush the head of the serpent. So of course she's excited to have a man from the Lord. But it's not just one man. Notice she bare his brother Abel. So notice she conceives once, she bears twice, so these are twins more than likely. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Now, I don't think from the creation of Adam and Eve to the fall was more than just a couple days. God rested the seventh day. I actually lean more towards that the eighth day is probably when the fall took place. Because this is the first time Adam knows Eve, his wife. And she conceives and bears a child. So, couldn't be more than a few weeks after they're married, and they were married the day that they were created. So, this is not long after. I mean, we're a month or two away from the fall when and from creation when this begins to take place. And so then they're born. Abel keeps the sheep. Cain's tilled the ground. Notice verse 3, process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord, and Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof, and the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect, and Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. Now, why? Why did God respect Abel's offering, but not Cain's offering? Why was that? What's that? Yeah, exactly. Abel's was a blood sacrifice. He brought the firstlings. Now let me ask you this. How much effort did Abel have to put into that? Not a bit. Two other animals did all the work, and he just had to bring the sacrifice. But what about Cain? He brings a non-bloody sacrifice. How much work did he have to put into the fruit of his garden? A lot. Especially at a time when God is perpetually cursing the ground. It took a lot of labor. And so God did not have respect for that. Because that was not a blood sacrifice. There has to be life for life. The life of the flesh is in the blood. There has to be the taking of one life to spare another life. That's the way God ordained it. I think so. I think they had the example. I think that's exactly why God's holding him. And I think he had the example from Adam and Eve with God killing animals for them. But also we know that Abel, according to Matthew, I think it's 23. I think it's in Matthew 23, where Jesus calls Abel a prophet. So what would he be prophesying about? He would have been prophesying about Christ and the coming Messiah and the type in the sacrifice. So I do think Cain knew that. In fact, that's one of the things that God's going to tell him. If you do well, shall you not be accepted? And if you do not well, sin lieth at the door. There's an offering for sin. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Well, he had to know it. You just wonder, obviously he had to know
Right.
ahead of time. God's not going to just do that
Right.
arbitrarily. So you just wonder
How he knew? Yeah, that's one of those things, that particular detail is not given to us. But the fact that Abel knew to bring an animal sacrifice, right? Right.
Something we don't know. It's a rhetorical question. We're not going to know.
Yeah. Right. That's okay. And so we have what?
Well, that would have been the process of between Cain and Abel, which eventually happens to Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
Separates them as what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly, because Cain is going to be identified as being of the wicked one, and Abel is going to be the child of God.
This kind of sets the seed of Abel being disgruntled, basically, with what he's doing, but not giving the glory of what his word providing. He's providing and giving, but it's not as great as what his brother is doing.
Right.
Over here.
But I believe that Cain brought the best of his.
Yeah, I think he brought the best. Yeah, absolutely.
I took it when Cain, it was a prideful thing.
And I would almost guarantee that you're exactly right. That it is very much a pride thing. This is the work of my hands. This is the best I have. This is what I'm bringing. When actually what he should have done was take it to Abel, say, here, I need an animal, and barter it to get the animal, which is exactly what we see with the temple. Because you had to, and the tabernacle is you had to purchase a sacrifice, and you had to redeem it somehow with some sort of monetary thing. So yeah.
Goes back to earlier when you was talking about
Oh yeah, yeah, yep. So let's look here. Near the bottom of the page, so the acceptable and unacceptable sacrifice we just saw there with Cain and Abel. And so we see that God accepted Abel's offering and that it was a bloody sacrifice. So it was a life for life. It was also a sacrifice that didn't result from his own work. And again, they're referring to 1 John chapter 3. In this, children of God are manifest and the children of the devil, John says. He that doeth good is of God. He that doeth evil not seen God. And he says, in this, the children of God are manifest, children of the devil. And so he says, Cain did not love his brother and slew him because he was of that wicked one. And so he's the child of the devil. Now let's watch this here as we look at the line of Cain. Let's jump over to verse 16. And we know that Cain kills Abel because he was not able to satisfy God. Sorry, that was a bad attempt at good humor or something like that, or good attempt at bad humor. One or the other. But notice how Cain's line goes. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod. So we don't know exactly where Nod is, but if you go east of Eden, if Eden's border was around Babylon, you go east from there, you're getting into India, China, Mongolia, stuff like that. So that's somewhere in that region probably is where Nod was. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch. And he builded a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. And unto Enoch was born Irad, and Irad begat Mehujael, and Mehujael begat Methusael, and Methusael begat Lamech. And Lamech took unto him, how many? 2 wives. How many is he supposed to take? 1. Okay, so now we are already seeing something pretty bad going on in the line, something else bad going on in the line of Cain. And the name of the one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah, and Ada bare Jabal. He was the father of such as dwell in tents, and of such as have cattle. And his brother's name was Jubal, He was the father of all such as handle the harp and organ. And we're going to talk more about this when we get up to chapter 6 and 7. And Zillah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. And the sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. And Lamech said unto his wives, Adah and Zillah. Now watch this. Hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech. Hearken unto my speech. For I have slain a man to my wounding, and a young man to my hurt. So apparently this guy was a brawler. He got in a fight. And he says, there was an old man, and he hurt me. So I killed him. The word wounding there is simply, it can either mean that he bruised me or he hurt my feelings. And he killed him. Seems a little excessive, doesn't it? You know, and so much for eye, tooth for tooth, foot for foot, hand for hand. This is, you left a mark. I'm going to kill you. And then the other guy, he said, and then I got in a fight with a young man. And he hurt me, and so I killed him. And this is what he says. Verse 24, if Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, because remember, Cain went out and he says, you're cursing me to be a vagabond in the earth. There's people that are going to see me are going to try to kill me. And so God places a mark on Cain so that people know, don't kill him, because if you kill Cain, you're going to be avenged sevenfold. And so Lamech, in his pride, says, well, if it's sevenfold for Cain, truly Lamech, it's 70 and sevenfold. Nobody's going to touch me because I am so much better than my great-great-great-great-grandfather. That's kind of the idea. So Cain's line, notice here in your notes, Genesis 4:16-24 gives a genealogy from Cain. Cain's line is depicted as being evil. So this is what we have here. We have a depiction of evil in the line of Cain. Then verse 25, we get a ray of hope. Adam knew Eve his wife again, and she bare a son and called his name Seth. For God, said she, hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew. And to Seth, to him, there was born a son, and he called his name Enos. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. So here we see a pattern being established, where the elder is going to serve the younger. Cain's the older, Seth is the younger, and it's from Seth's line that Jesus is eventually going to come. Now, verse 26 shows us the beginning of worship. Seth has a son named Enos. Then began men to call on the name of the Lord. That's worship. And these worshipers of God are later identified in Genesis 6:2 as being the sons of God. That's what it means. And so this marks transition to the line of Seth, which is the line through which Christ will come. And what's interesting to note is that when we look at Seth's line, let's just look here real quick. I'm almost finished. We're going to read this, and I got 2 things, and then we're done. So, chapter 5, verse 1, this is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him, male and female created he them, and blessed them, and called their name Adam, in the day when they were created. And Adam lived 130 years, and begat a son in his own likeness. Now, most guys, I think, long before this are kind of retiring from that business. But and Adam's just getting going. Adam lived 130 years, begat a son in his own likeness, after his image, and called his name Seth. In the days of Adam, after he had begotten Seth, were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. And Seth lived 105 years, begat Enos. And Seth lived, after he begat Enos, 807 years, and begat sons and daughters. Now, one thing to notice here is, so Seth is 807 years, 105 years, and begets Enos. That doesn't mean he wasn't having children before then. We're tracing a particular lineage is what's going on. That's why these are the ones that are being mentioned. Doesn't mean that those are the only ones prior to up to that point. Seth lived after he begat Enos 807 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. Enos lived 90 years, and begat Canaan. And Enos lived after he begat Canaan 815 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enos were 905 years, and he died. And Canaan lived 70 years, and begat Mahalalel. That's a mouthful. And Canaan lived after he begat Mahalalel 840 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. And Mahalalel lived 65 years and begat Yered. And Mahalalel lived after he begat Yered 830 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. And Yered lived 162 years, and he begat Enoch. And Yered lived after he begat Enoch 800 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Yered were 962 years, and he died. And Enoch lived 65 years and begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and he died. Is that what it says? That's interesting. Did you know that Enoch never died? His son was the oldest man to ever live who died before his father. That's a riddle. Notice, Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. And they had a very close relationship. And Methuselah lived 187 years and begat Lamech. And Methuselah lived, after he begat Lamech, 782 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. And Lamech lived 182 years and begat a son. And he called his name Noah, saying, This same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord had cursed. Now, notice, when Lamech has Noah, he has the same idea that Eve had when she had Cain. This is going to be the guy that removes the curse. Now, did Noah remove a curse? No, he wasn't even a very good Messiah figure, was he? Because what happens afterwards? He gets drunk and does some other stupid stuff. Now, I want to bring this up here. So this period covers 1,556 years in this genealogy, from creation to the birth of Noah's sons. And one thing to notice is that the dates are only given for the line of people that lead to Jesus Christ. This is one of the things you find when you look at the genealogies. When you have so-and-so begat so-and-so, and they lived this long and then died, you have the genealogy of Jesus Christ that you're tracing. Let me give you this real quick, and then we'll be done. So Genesis chapter 5 is interesting, because as you look through the names, okay, you notice down at the bottom you got some blanks. I'm going to go ahead and fill these in. And then there's kind of an interesting thing here. Is that right here in this genealogy, the Lord gives us the gospel message in the names. So you notice on the blanks there, you have Adam, Seth, Enos, Canaan, Mahalalel, Yered, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah. And the blanks there. So first blank is man. The word Adam, the name Adam means man. Okay? Seth means appointed. 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 Enos means mortal. Canaan means sorrow. Mahalalel means the blessed God. God is the blank there, blessed God. Yered means shall come down. Shall come down. Enoch means declaring. Declaring. Methuselah means his death shall bring. His death shall bring. Lamech means despairing. D-E-S-P-A-I-R-I-N-G. Despairing. and Noah means rest. Put that together, you have a wonderful message. Man is appointed mortal sorrow, but the blessed God shall come down, declaring, his death shall bring the despairing rest. What a message. And that's exactly what's going to happen, right? That's what they're looking forward to, is the blessed God coming down and bringing the despairing rest. Any questions? Everybody got their blanks and stuff? I'm sure I probably created more questions than answers that we can get to next week, probably. All right, you're dismissed. I'm sorry.
I didn't get what Mahalo meant.
The blessed God.